Yes. Okay, we are getting it started. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in to Brown Girls Sound Off to BGSO. We're in the building, y'all. Oh my goodness. First of all, oh, I know that's right. Come on, we can be a little happier than that. Look, it's April 1st. It's a whole new month, right? Like
Hey
spring is
now.
okay, say hello to spring, honey. And so, it's always a good thing when you can make it through an April Fool's Day without getting, terribly tricked, right? Because tricks are for kids. But anyway, if you are just tuning in and you are not familiar with BGSO, I humbly encourage you to actually catch up because you miss a lot of really good stuff. Last month for Women's History Month, we started out talking about identity from the woman of color perspective. And you're going to find that even though we are moving on from that being an intentional focus, in many ways, this entire podcast is intentionally focused on the woman of color and our identities, right? But this month, for the month of April, we're going to be moving into exploring relationships. I'm so excited. Talking about relationships, all kinds. I mean, one of the most treasured relationship I have that is the one that I have with my sisters right here. So all types of relationships. Um, so when we think about the fact that it's warming up, right? Yes, it rains in the springtime, but it's warming up. And for most of us, cupping season is behind us, right? We left that in the wintertime. But as Edwina likes to say, spring fling is on the horizon. And there are many of us talking about, relationships. We're talking about whether to get into them, whether to leave them, how do we go about making it work? I mean, there's so many discussions happening about relationships. But this time for this episode, we're going to be talking about before you even jump into a relationship, even if it's a spring fling, right? Before you even jump into a relationship, what are some of the ways in which you prepare yourself? And obviously you can't foresee everything, but there are some ways that we're going to talk about that you can actually prepare to be in relationship with someone else. And when I think about this topic and the preparation that goes into it, I actually think about the way that we set up these particular series. So we started out talking about identity, and now we're moving into a topic of relationships. And from my perspective, ladies, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this when you do speak, I think that that's where we all should start, right? We should all start by doing a lot of self work and digging deep and learning who it is that we are, right? Who am I? Because otherwise, you won't know what you're going to be bringing to that relationship. And we've got to be thinking about, well, what experiences and contexts are wrapped around the identities that we hold. So, I would say that we start by doing a lot of self work, learning about ourselves, what makes us tick, what our love languages are. All those things are part of our identities and what we prefer, and what our partners, our mates will ultimately love about us, hopefully. But Edwina, I'd love to know more about what you think. Like, how is it that, we should prepare to enter relationships?
I think you led off like pretty much with the nail on the head, which is that self work. I think we need to definitely take some time to get to know who we are, and what we want. And in thinking about relationship, like what kind of a relationship to even begin with. Thinking about, is this something that, am I looking for something long term? Like, am I trying to prepare for a relationship as far as like a dating relationship? And I just kind of want to, tiptoe into the water and just be just at ease with it? Or am I looking for something a little bit more committed? So I think we need to, before we even prepare ourselves, is like, what am I preparing myself for? And that's something I think we definitely need to do the work, because you definitely don't want to wait until you're in it and then try to figure it all out.
Girl, wouldn't that be a whole hot mess, right? And it has,
Right.
listen, and at a later time, we're going to be discussing like how that is a whole hot mess, right? I can tell you because I've been in it. The other thing that when you brought up, thinking about what it is that what you want, right? Like specifically, what type of relationship do I want? I think a lot of people, that's like the stop sign that folks just do that rolling stop. You know what I mean? They
Yeah.
don't quite stop there and really look both ways and make sure they can proceed. They just kind of roll right on through that joint. And we should stop and think about what type of relationship are we even preparing for? Because
Exactly.
different types of relationships require different mindsets, right? I mean,
Exactly.
listen, if you're really entering this whole spring fling season thinking, oh, I just want to date, then you got to have a mindset for dating. You can't be the jealous type, right? And blowing up folks, phone and getting all mad when you see them at Artscape and Afram. Right? You got to be
Right.
real about what the expectations are. Because otherwise, how can you hold yourself and others accountable if there aren't expectations that are shared? The other thing I just want to quickly mention, because I'm dying to hear what Nafisa has to say. The other thing I want to mention is I kind of want to go back to like our identities and what you share in terms of thinking about what type of relationship that you want. I think that a lot of times, like as women of color, we get this notion that we're only deserving of certain types of relationships, if we're even deserving of relationships at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of doing that self work and thinking of what type of relationship you want, you've also got to keep in mind, I'm deserving of whatever relationship it is that I want. So if you want that monogamous one and you want just one-on-one time with your partner, then that's what you deserve, right? Right? Say it with me, Black and brown women. That's exactly what you deserve. And so you got to go after not just what you want, but also what you deserve. And we deserve it all.
Right. That's
Sis,
right.
Nafisa, I want to hear what you got to say.
Well, I definitely agree with what both you and Edwina said. And you have to start with yourself. You have to do that self-work. And I just feel like, especially when you've been in like a long relationship, it's like you're so used to being in one, like people are so quick to jump right back into another one. And I think it's so important before going into a relationship, especially a romantic one, that you really do that self work and really do the healing part, because people often bring those past traumas into new relationships and it really affects them. And just being honest with yourself and knowing, am I ready for this? Like, maybe be comfortable, I think, with being by yourself and doing that self work and whatever that self healing looks like for you, so you can heal from whatever things that you got from the relationship that you're coming out of, and work through those things before entering into another relationship. And just knowing it's okay to have some time where you are by yourself and where you are trying to figure things out, where you are trying to figure out like, okay, what do I want? What type of person do I want in a relationship? Do I want a long-term relationship right now? Do I want to just date and have fun? Figuring out those things and working through and doing that healing piece before entering into a relationship is really, really important. With any type of relationship, even with a friendship, you might be scarred because maybe your best friend stabbed you in the back and you just don't trust any woman, like, so I think just really being honest with yourself about where you're at that moment, and what self-work you need to do so that you can be your best self in whatever type of relationship you're entering. I think it's very important, that healing piece.
You know what, sis? You actually, you just talked about something that hit a whole nerve with me. I had to write it down. You were talking about, feeling like you were stabbed in the back by a really good girlfriend, right? Because that part, right? And I think that in so many ways, when we think about, Black and brown communities of women, right? And we think about all the internalized stuff that we just kind of take in, that impact the way that we show up for each other, that may make it more likely that we're going to stab each other in the back, or undercut our good friend, or do all that kind of stuff. And yes, all women do that. And what I'm saying is that I want to acknowledge that there is some deeply rooted stuff, right? Some internalized oppression that we have already taken in about ourselves, our fellow sisters, and that impacts the way that we show up. So when you talked about, healing from one relationship to the next and kind of moving away from like the romantic aspect, I immediately thought about the work I had to do to be in relationships like this because I wasn't always there. And so I want to acknowledge that I wasn't always here. I was that woman who used to say, oh yeah, I just got way more male friends than female friends. I trust men more. And I had to think about, well, where did that mess come from? Right. And yes, I can say it's because I've been burned by other females, but honestly, it's also because of the way I was showing up in a relationship. We were both showing up all messed up. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just so critical that we do that healing no matter what type of relationship that we're preparing for, so that, as you said, Nafisa, we don't carry that trauma into the next one. And so now what we can do is what we're doing, right? We are creating platforms and spaces for sisters to come together. We're not carrying past traumas into our work together. And so that's what I really appreciate about what you said. So thank you. Thank you so much. Chantal, what do you have to offer? I'm curious.
Well, I think just like all of you ladies said, doing that self work, doing that inner healing work, really digging deep and asking yourself those deep questions about yourself. So I think one of the things that's really important is, am I reflecting the types of relationships that I want to attract? Right? We often ask for, well, we want the man to make six figures or treat us like this, or we want people to do certain things for us, but we have to ask ourselves, are we ourselves showing up for those people in the same way? Are we reciprocating those relationships back that we feel like we deserve? And we do deserve them. So it goes back to addressing those internal issues, dealing with that trauma, digging that stuff out, getting it out, and then finding people that you really relate to, that you can really connect to, is what's really important. And being your most authentic self. I think when you're your most authentic self, you're going to attract authenticity into your life. So I think that's important.
That is so, listen, Edwina was like, that's the one. That is so important. I love when you talked about the reflection, because it made me think of some things around, that I've seen on social media, partly what you mentioned in terms of actually embodying those things that you wish to see in other people. So if you want someone who is driven and, goal getting and honest and has integrity, then you need to show up in that way as well. The other thing I want to mention, because this actually came up in an earlier session that we all did, I'm not going to mention, but you'll know when I say it, where people are wondering, well, how can some of these women, ask for such and such and they're not bringing such and such to the table? So you know how I am with the yes, dot, 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 and. So the other perspective I want to add to what you shared, Chantel, is, that there's also nothing wrong with wanting things in people that you actually don't bring to the table. I'm not saying that that's universally true, right? You can't expect someone to be honest and you're not honest, but hear me out. What I'm talking about is, being yin and yang, right? So you can, like for me, I am very like go, 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 go. I'm so driven to the point that I drive myself crazy. So I do probably need to attract someone in my life who can bring calm to me. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to bring calm to that person. My calm just might look a little different, might be a little turned up, right? It might come in different ways. But I do also want to share that perspective, because I've seen a lot of memes on Facebook about that, about reflection. And I think in many ways, reflection, we can talk about reflection, and we can talk about being complementary, right? We can talk about that as well. So, thank you for sharing that. But it made me think of that as well. So, let's think. So we've already talked about what we need to do in order to prepare for relationships. Now let's kind of, we're not going to jump too far ahead because we're going to get there next week, but let's take a baby step ahead and think about when we're in it, right? And I want to talk about some of the things people forget to do. So we're taking a baby step ahead, but we're looking back like, oh, man, I should have blah, blah, blah. Like if we're thinking of the number one things, what do we think that people most often forget to do before they show up to relationships door? I know you.
Oh,
Go
can
ahead.
I go?
Oh,
Okay.
go ahead,
I think,
sis.
and I'm doing a lot of self-reflection in this conversation because, I've been in a relationship and I'm out and then I'm trying to prepare for another one or whatsoever. And so I always think about don't forget your values. Don't forget your, like, what is it that you value? Because it's like when you're in it, and then now I'm telling the person, listen, I need communication. Then I'm telling what like my non-negotiables and stuff like that. And the person, looking at me like, well, this isn't, this wasn't a problem when we first started or whatsoever. So I definitely think like really, and it kind of goes back to like that is part of the preparation. Like, don't forget the things that you value the most because they will show up. And maybe you don't know what it is that you value until it shows up. So I don't know, do that work so that it is not coming to you. Or maybe from your last relationship, start to do that reflecting back on that last relationship. Like, what were those things that was just like, it irked your nerves so bad that it was like going into another relationship now? I know for a fact I need consistency. Like, what are the things that you value? Think about that now. Take time to think about that.
Don't forget your values. You heard me saying that. Oh my gosh, I love it. Don't forget your values. Chantal, what are you thinking?
I think for me, really, just like Edwina said, know what you want and communicate that very clearly in the beginning, so that there are no games being played. Communicate, be clear about what you want and what your expectations are, and go from there. That's going to tell you real quick if this is a healthy relationship, something you can, put up with or deal with. And it's going to let you know if this is the person for you, So again, set those intentions, be clear, communicate. And I love that word, consistency.
Ooh, I love it. So I'm hearing you build on Edwina. Edwina said, don't forget your values. And Chantel's like, but you got to communicate them clearly, right? So like for me, the way my brain works, I'm a visual person. I'm envisioning like puzzle pieces. So you want to not forget your values, but you also want to not forget to communicate them crystal clear. So there's no question about what it is that you are looking for in a relationship, right? And a lot of times, I think it's not about what we're looking for in another person. I mean, even in this moment, I'm going to be honest, as Edwina already shared, I'm doing a lot of reflection right now. So the way that I even think about relationships is being shaped during this conversation, because I think a lot of times, we think about our values and communicating them clearly, but I think we forget that also that our values sometimes change, right? And so that's why we can't look for them in a person, but we've got to think, what do we want out of this situation? So what should this relationship just always feel like? How should I feel? How should I be able to show up in this relationship? So that's kind of, what's top of mind for me, is that I think when we, hyper focus on what do I want from this person instead of what do I want from this union, right? What do I want from this partnership? Because your values also, again, they do things that I valued even 5 years ago. I don't value as much now. I would have never, I wouldn't say never, but I did not put time and space at the top of my list. I would not. I would have said all the other things that are important, respect, and I value all that stuff. And now, as a full-time business owner and doctoral student and a homeschooling mom, it's like, no, I need to be in a relationship in which I have time and space to just be. And it's hard to like quantify or qualify that. As far as like, how do I look for that in a person? So that's why I brought that point. You know what I mean? So I can't say I'm looking for a man, who's going to give me time and space. Because first of all, you can't give me anything, right? I'm going to take my time and space, but I need to be able to have time and space in a relationship. So, Nafisa, what are you thinking?
I'm agreeing with everything you ladies said. And I think definitely just that communication piece is so important. The consistency, everything you said, and looking at yourself too. And I think just being like unapologetically being able to ask for what you need, because I think sometimes women, you start out in a relationship and maybe something bothered you, or you maybe need something, and you're like, you are afraid to maybe speak up about it or communicate that. And I think that's so important, especially at the beginning, to let your person that you are, dating know what you need, because maybe that's something that they not feeling like they can do or want to do. Then early on, okay, this is probably not going to work for me, opposed to not really being vocal about it and speaking up about what you need out of the relationship and what you are looking for, to have your needs met. And then that not happening, and it's like it continues to get brushed over, and then that's where resentment comes, frustration, and then it shows up in other things. So I think it's so important that you make sure you unapologetically are vocal about, like, look, like, this is what I need. Like, like Tony said, I need to have the space to be able to be me and do what I need to do. If you know that you need to have that quality time, this is what I need. Whatever it is that you feel like you need, I think it's okay, and unapologetically speak out and be vocal about that in a relationship. And one of the things that you said, Tony, that really definitely resonated with me is, like, you can't expect, like, we are like looking, you can't find happiness in somebody else. It's not nobody else's responsibility to make you happy. It's like you're adding to my life, but you're responsible, for your own happiness. And I think people forget that also, because it's like you get in a relationship and it's like, okay, well, this person is supposed to make me happy. But it's like you have to do that work. And I feel like when you are happy and you're doing what you need to do and pouring into yourself, that you attract that type of mate as well. Not that anything's going to be perfect. So that again goes into that piece of making sure that you unapologetically speak up and voice your needs in a relationship, so they know that your partner knows.
I love everything that you add in, so especially that part about, finding happiness within yourself first, right? That, I mean, if we were to, I think you so beautifully summed up, if we were to sum up, well, what does it look like to prepare? It looks like finding happiness within yourself first, right? And then we have all these, we're educated. So then we have, it's like a concept map, all these little arrows and lines coming off. Well, what does that look like? How is it that I find happiness? As Edwina said, we don't forget our values. What are my values? So I can actually visualize everything that each of us has shared, just kind of branching off of that, finding happiness within yourself first, because you're so right, sis. We cannot expect someone else to make us happy, because I mean, and what an unfair expectation on another human being who is also going to be going through life, the ups and downs and ebbs and flows of it. How unfair is it to look to someone else, to make you happy? But that's why I go back to that time and space seems like, if the, finding happiness within yourself is this large umbrella, the time and space for me is another kind of big umbrella, because it's time and space for me to figure myself out. Maybe, the relationship is going through a course and it's thrown my values off track, and now I have new values, or, I have new identities I've taken on. Maybe now I'm a caregiver, whereas before I was not, so I need time and space to make those adjustments, right? And so that's just kind of what I'm thinking about. Edwina, did you want to share something?
No, I'm listening and I'm taking it all in, and I'm a visual learner also. So I was definitely like creating that concept map in my head. I was like, yes, I
I
think
know,
like
right?
I'm yeah, I love it. I really love it. And I like that you had said something earlier about like the feel. And I know people like, I don't know, they might kind of like push back from or push, with the like, how does this make me feel? I mean, I really think, because I am like a touchy feel person, when something doesn't feel right, then there's something that isn't right. And so I definitely think like when you are preparing or when you're in it and something just doesn't feel right, like be very in tune with your intuitions, like if it don't feel right, something's not right.
then it ain't right, right?
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think that there is I think that we're kind of shifting back around as a society, but I think in so many ways we try to, cast feelings aside as if
Yeah.
like feelings have no place here. Like who cares how, and to be honest, in many ways it starts from when we're even children. That's a whole different, conversation.
Mhm.
But feelings are absolutely necessary. Like absolutely. Yes, I believe there should be an undercurrent of commitment and some other things, especially if you take vows, and those types of things. And at the end of the day, we don't show up to relationships as robots, right? We are
Right.
emotional beings, right? With emotional intelligence. And we do feel certain ways. And so we do have to be cognizant of how we're feeling when we're in a certain space, when we're in a relationship. How do we feel? Because how we feel when we're in a relationship could impact how we feel about ourselves. So we can't dismiss how we feel and cast that to the side and say, oh, forget your feelings. Absolutely not, because I've been in situations, I've been in relationships where how I felt within the relationship started to negatively shape the way that I felt about myself. And so I don't know if y'all hear me on that one or you
Yeah.
all feel me on that one, but that's why we
Mhm.
cannot take feelings out of it, because it absolutely matters in terms of the way we see ourselves. You know,
Yeah.
so I don't know. Like I said, it gives me pause when I do hear people try to delineate, like, well, is this vows and commitment, or is it about how you feel? Well, it's a yes and.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
a whole yes and. We cannot negate how people are contributing to the way that we feel, the way that we feel about ourselves. So as we start to wrap up this episode, I want us to think about, I want us to actually put ourselves in, a situation. Maybe we've been in a situation where we were preparing to enter a relationship or re enter a relationship. If you were to look back at yourself, like, what advice do you wish you had either been given by somebody else or that you had given yourself before entering that relationship? So, like, if you're speaking to yourself, what might you say?
I, I think I would definitely just say to, as I said earlier, is to make sure that you are doing that self work and really being honest about where you are. Make sure that you are healed and working on yourself. Have you worked through the things or the traumas that you had from past relationships, whether it be romantic or platonic, whatever it is, family things? Is really, really being honest about where you are, and then thinking about like what you really want. Once you do that self work and that healing, once you are going into those different relationships, what am I trying to get out of this relationship? And to make sure that you are communicating that clearly and making sure that you speak up about what you need early on in those relationships. And if they're not serving you, you gotta go, sis.
Yeah.
In one sentence, what might you share, Edwina?
Take some time for yourself.
Thank
That's
you.
it.
How about you, Chantel?
Trust yourself.
Mm. And I would just say, know your worth, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
So thank you so, so, so much. This has been an energizing conversation. One that we all have, whether we have them internally, whether we have them with our family members, our really close friends, or even when we have them with our partners in relationships. So we can't hide from this conversation. And I'm already looking forward to the next one. I just want to recap some nuggets that we heard. So we know we want to communicate clearly, and so we've got to develop those communication skills before entering a relationship. But let me not jump the gun. We've got to know what it is we want to communicate, right? So what are your values? Who are you? What type of relationship do you even want? Right? Don't show up and be surprised, honey. Don't be blindsided. What is it that you're looking for? And at the end of the day, as Nafisa said, once you've done all that, You got to know when to go too if it's not serving you, sis. All right, so join us next week. We will be talking more about relationships. We're going to take a leap forward and start to look at, well, how is it that we don't lose ourselves once we're in it? So we can do all the prep work, but still stuff can go wrong, honey. Trust me, I know. So thank you so much for tuning in to BGSO. We will see you next week. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.